for doing this and coming back to Integral Life. You did do a previous session as well some time ago that was a little bit more leadership oriented, but
Hmm.
Joran came to my, I first saw Joran joining one of the I'm a part of an executive coaching team with a company called Newberg Gore,
That's great.
and Joran was presenting there on a very sort of a startup sort of oriented kind of presentation. And then months go by after that, and I somehow land on these random YouTube videos where you were speaking about like the integral church and like really presenting on integral ideas to a group that didn't know much about integral. And I was like, this guy looks really familiar. And then I was like, oh yeah, he gave a presentation on sort of this executive coaching visual, what do you call it?
I
Visual
think it was OKRs, wasn't it? Or was it?
OKRs. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Goal
Yeah.
setting.
That's right, yeah. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this man is like totally into integral and all of that." So I invited you, and now you have authored two books, two new books, and here you are. I'm so glad
Hmm.
that you're here to give us a more spiritually important series of sessions. And I think this topic is important given where we're at in our these crazy times that we live in right now. So thank you, Joran. Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Namali. Thanks for having me. And yeah, and thanks for the reminder. I had forgotten about that. That's how we had connected. Yeah, that's really great. And yeah, to talk about my new book is called Spiritual Edge, and it is really about the edges between all of these roles that we play in, as for myself, facilitator, consultant, coach, father, musician, producer, spiritual leader, chaplain, all these things that we may do or have done or get pigeonholed as or, perceived as. And then, who we really are is that the aggregate of those labels, the person who shows up in between all of those. So, um, yeah, so thanks for having me back. And yeah, the last book was about facilitation and how to facilitate group collaboration. And that was my fifth book. So this new book is my sixth one that's out, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But and it's exciting to see everybody on the call. Thank you everybody so much for taking the time. I know what it means to take time out of your Saturday. And for those of you who have just come off of the practice call, the meditation call, hopefully this isn't too jarring of an experience to get up in our heads and think a little bit for the next hour and a half or so. And Cindy, good to see Cindy again. Cindy was, you mentioned my work with Integral Church. Cindy I actually met at the Integral European Conference in in Siófok, Hungary, when I went there to lead circles in 2016 and 2018. And yeah, so it's great to see some familiar faces as well. So just want to touch on the resources that we have underneath the dotted line. And those are the things that we're going to talk about today. The new book is here as a link. The workbook is here as a download. I already demoed that. We're going to talk largely about a study that was done at Harvard Divinity School on the spiritual but not religious, or what they called the religious nones, Nones. That means that I do not have a religion. I do not have a faith. And when you ask me what it is and you present me with a list of boxes, there is not one that I can check that describes what I am. So that's why they called them the religious nones. Um, there's a study down below the line called How We Gather, and that's the one we're going to discuss today. And I talk about it at length in the book. The six qualities that Angie Thurston and Casper ter Kuile, those are the two people who led this study, they discovered that across the board, even though the spiritual but not religious, the religious nones, even though they weren't going to church, even though they did not have a religious or a spiritual community to speak of, they were getting their needs met in different ways. They were attending potlucks. They were attending book clubs. They were going to CrossFit. They were volunteering in their community. They were doing different things across the board that satisfied these 6 criteria. And these 6 criteria were consistent across the study. I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to show you what those 6 are. The first one was community. That there was a space where they could value and foster deep relationships that centered on service to others. That was satisfied whether these people were doing a sing-along in a bar or whether they were digging a row in a community garden. Personal transformation was the second, making a conscious and dedicated effort to develop one's own body, mind, and spirit. And the word for spirit or soul or consciousness or intuition, etc., might change across the board, but this criteria remained the same. There was a growth mindset, and they were making a conscious effort to iterate and transform themselves. Social transformation was the third, pursuing justice and beauty in the world through the creation of networks for good. So this is changing the world around us now, not just ourselves, not just intrapersonally, not just interpersonally, but actually moving the building blocks of the world around to make it better. The fourth one was purpose finding, clarifying, articulating, and acting on our own personal mission in life. So knowing our why, connecting with why we're here on this earth, what is ours to do, right? The fifth one is creativity, allowing time and space to activate our imagination and engage in play. So important. And a lot of that creativity or play happens in spaces where we maybe don't want to call it playing, but that is indeed what we are doing, right? Anytime we are moving into what feels like a liminal space, but that also has clear borders, or if we're moving into what feels like moving out of world time or into sacred time, or maybe we're in a real flow state, we're in a really focused state. Like if we're on playing a team sport or really focused on what we're writing. Those are creative and imaginative spaces. And that sense of creativity is an important element in what people are seeking. Number 6, the final one, is accountability, right? What's the purpose of all this connection? How are we measuring and tracking our growth against each other in these communities, right? How are we holding oneself and another responsible for working toward defined goals, right? Whether it's what Namali and I were talking about earlier, using OKRs, right? Some kind of goal setting framework, or SMART goals, or a Gantt chart, or a vision board, or a calendar. What is the tool that we are using to hold ourselves accountable to our growth and to the goals that we've set in motion for ourselves and each other? So these 6 qualities: community, personal transformation, social transformation, purpose finding, creativity, and accountability, were the ones that the team at Harvard Divinity School identified across the board for all of these communities. And I put another resource underneath here, which is, I don't know if you all have seen this yet or not, but the recent interview with Simon Sinek and Trevor Noah was fascinating, because it wasn't just about loneliness. There's another really great study on loneliness that just came out. It wasn't just about loneliness and vulnerability, but in the very last minutes, just as the interview was closing, they hit on this amazing insight. And I don't know if you guys have seen that clip on YouTube yet, but if you watch this interview all the way to the end, all of a sudden, Trevor lights up and he says, I'm just realizing that, this idea of loneliness might be because we're putting all these expectations on one person in our life. Like, I'm expecting my partner to show up and be my loving partner, my romantic partner, my accountability partner, my coach, all of these things. And I don't have friends anymore that I connect with. and I don't have somebody to vent to about my work day, and I don't have anybody to, go out and see live music with or go see a play, right? And I expect my one partner to satisfy all those boxes, to check all those boxes for me. And that's how we get into trouble, right? It's expecting one person to fill all of that. And Cynic says, yes, and it's the same in our communities. The same thing happens in our communities. We used to have the Lions Club and the Rotary Club and the Knights of Columbus and the whatever club we belonged to, socially, and our friends groups and different friends groups and my partner's friends groups and all these different concentric circles and overlapping circles in the Venn diagram of our social network. We used to have all these bubbles, this styrofoam of bubbles that we could jump to get our needs met, our social needs met. And now we have work. Now we have our office or our virtual team as our second space. And we expect our workplace to satisfy our spiritual principles, our personal values. We expect our workplace to be where we can talk about our political values and have everybody agree with us. We expect that workspace to satisfy all of these needs for us because our entire social network has collapsed. And that's where we get into trouble, is expecting one space to provide and fulfill for all of those needs. So it's a fascinating conversation that they have together, and directly related to this topic that we're talking about today. I'm curious, this is where the interactive part comes in. I'm curious where we think, oh, I locked these down. Let me unlock them. Where we think these 6 criteria fall on the 4 quadrants. Where are you personally getting some of these needs met? We've talked a little bit about, the Lions Club and the book club and the volunteering and the going to the gym and going to church. I want to see in images. Images on the left-hand side are in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th button down on the menu in mural. It looks like a little horizon with a little sun, and that helps you open up a little Google image search, and you can just drag images onto this, directly onto the mural. Show me in an image where you're currently getting some of these needs met. Community, personal transformation, social transformation, accountability, creativity, purpose finding, right? Bring in an image, you can bring in a photo, you can bring in a logo if it's an organization you belong to. Well, you can see there's a lot of richness here in the ways that those of us on this call are getting these needs met. So here are some writing prompts that I have laid out based on the 6 themes. The first one here is, and I've got a few stickies put down already. You can copy those, or you can just double click and create your own sticky here. The first prompt is, how am I making a conscious and dedicated effort to develop my own body, mind, and spirit? And I'm going to put a minute on the clock, and you guys can just grab a sticky and answer that one here. I see daily prayer. I see hatha yoga. An awareness practice, doing body work with a trainer. Yoga, walking, writing, gratitudes every morning, lucid dreaming, intentionally communicating more with friends through any medium available. Second question prompt, just to the right of that. In what ways am I pursuing justice and beauty in the world through the creation of networks for good? Time's up. I'll just read them. Yes, volunteering with the church. Online political discussions. Supporting missionaries. Making a better effort to see the other side through steel manning What is steel manning?
Steel manning and straw manning.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it. So I know straw manning, right? Which
yeah.
is like a false, like a
It's
like
like
an
fake
excuse, right? Like a
yeah.
yeah,
Yes, the
scapegoating.
steel manning is when you take the other side. Like for example, maybe like all the kind of the tariff chaos that's going on.
Hmm.
I'm trying to see in what ways can I try to see Trump's fears that are maybe leading him
Hmm.
to behave the way he does. Maybe not just in relation to it, just like maybe just strengthening someone else's argument that I may not believe in, strengthening it
Hmm.
even better than they can, or trying to articulate their argument for why they're doing what they're doing even better than they could. That's steel manning.
Nice. And somebody else said facilitating dialogue meetings, political activity by following legislation and commenting, and playing music with friends. And Wheaton said house plants of various kinds, feeding the birds, openness to others, important to justice for all and not just one side at a time. Showing up for the rallies, giving money, volunteering, engaging friends who are on the other side. So I'm seeing a theme, right? If we were to harvest themes from each of these sections, I'd say, what do you notice in number 2, right? I see dialogue, theme, other side, right? Engaging. So a lot of bridge building happening in the second question. Let's move on to question 3. Um, in what ways do I value and foster deep relationships that center on service to others? Teaching, coaching, complaining less when I am asked for help. I love that one. Creating caring circles, doing my best to help friends who need help, attempting to connect people with similar interests and goals, praying with unhoused neighbors, and attending weekly micro church. And Wheaton here for number 3, listening carefully and fully, sharing knowledge and curiosity, shopping with my 89-year-old neighbor who can no longer walk alone. So helping. That's the theme here, right? Coaching, teaching, helping, listening, connecting. I'm the purple one, whoever wrote attempt to connect people with similar interests and goals. Did you mean attempt to connect to people? Like to others who share your interests and goals, or are you playing matchmaker and connecting other people who have similar interests and goals?
Matchmaker.
Matchmaker, Luke. Yeah. Let's move on to number, I forget, 4, whatever one we're on. How do I hold myself and others responsible when working toward defined goals? This is that accountability question. How are we keeping ourselves and others accountable, responsible toward the goal? Accountability practices, weekly check-ins, adding walking and fasting into the calendar. I make lists and I check things off. I notice when I or someone isn't doing their part. Are those lists, the pan flute there, I guess, that did that, are those lists public or shared?
Oh, no. I'm mostly talking about my husband and me doing, yeah, doing things that we want to get done around the house or for our dog or for our family or whatever. And yeah,
But you have your own list. You don't have like a whiteboard on the fridge or something.
we have shared lists. We use
Okay.
notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Have conversations for breakdown. Share your commitments with others. Yeah. Weekly meetings. Apps like Covenant Eyes. Who can tell me about that? What is Covenant Eyes?
Yes, that was me. I'm in a group of men in recovery, and that we download this app, and it kind of helps us keep each other accountable of the kind of content we're consuming online and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Thanks, Delmo. Yeah, so the goal might be, yeah, the goal might be to, yeah, moderate that access, your access to that content. The goal might be fasting, the goal might be abstinence, the goal could be any number of things, but that's a tool then that's used.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I will statements. Tell me about those.
Yeah, every time we end Bible study, we end with I will statements, like how am I going to apply this week? And then the next week we check in on each other's I will statements.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Second to the last one. When and where do I allow time and space to activate my imagination? When do I engage in play? Oh, somebody says, honestly, not enough play. Who is not getting enough play in their life?
That would be me.
No,
The
Molly. What do you want to do?
I wish that I could really be more using my creativity and doing more art and creative projects. I think I also just really, this brings up also my little dog that I lost recently, and I think my sense of play was with him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said the first thing you said was art projects. What would you do if you had
I even
time?
now I do have like I keep my paintbrushes and my little art pads in places where I can see.
Mhm.
So I do engage in a little bit of art when I can, but it's not enough. I wish I could do more art.
What does more look like?
Like
Bigger
weekend.
paintings or other
No, like
things?
a weekend spending more time
Hmm.
because it puts me into a kind of a flow state. I think I could say that I've been myself and my friend Cheryl, who's in this community as well, we've been leading some sessions where we're kind of engaging the right brain more, how to like move into the right hemisphere more, and some exercises we do for that, they actually do help me in creating or kind of engaging a more flow, a deeper sense of a flow state and a creative space, a more joyful place when I actively engage the right brain.
Not enough.
Not enough. I don't, play is also a feeling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
A sense of feeling of having joy and delight and lightheartedness in your heart.
Hmm.
I think I don't have enough of that.
Hmm. How recent? Well, then you mentioned your dog. What was your dog's name?
My dog was Duncan, and he died in September of last year.
Okay. Yeah. And so maybe there's still some grief around that then,
For sure, for
around
sure.
play and the loss of play and the loss of that joy and
Absolutely.
spontaneity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I see other people playing with ChatGPT and having game night and writing poetry and camping and painting and shamanic drumming and practicing the keyboard, the flute, and singing. All right, the last one, and looks like Dalmo worked ahead for us before he left the call. He put a couple answers down on the last question. How might you clarify, articulate, and act on your personal mission in life? This is the question of purpose finding. Sharing the gospel with others, reading wisdom literature. Someone else said trying to publish their novel, participating in conversations. Cindy in the chat says, finding my mission is more intuitive than mental. Can you say, I'll put that on here, but can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think the importance is the insight, the going within to find those things. It's not something you can read in a book or discuss about so much as finding within yourself. That's what I mean with that. The intuitive side, which you could call the spiritual side as well.
Sure. Yeah. And then do you feel like how connected to your purpose, your personal purpose, do you feel?
Um, very much connected. And it's something I do daily, consciously, connect with my inner purpose or my divine presence. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And then to be open for what comes from that source.
What I hear you saying is that your personal path of purpose finding is actually in your connection to a higher power.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then designing, writing, and delivering transformational learning, more writing, recording, discussing with the wife, counselor, working it every day with self or others. Okay. I want to move in and then the last 10 minutes here, just kind of talk a little bit about takeaways. What came up for you over the course of our discussion about these 6 central themes from the study? What did you notice? What did you observe? What were you aware of? And you can just unmute yourself and I'll capture on the mural as you're sharing, just popcorn style. Anybody want to share their takeaways from the conversation today?
I was aware how deep and how personal the questions were, and how undefensive this environment was in delving into them.
Well, at first I was totally over challenged with this mural thing. I've never done that before. And I was tempted to say, okay, I'm going to leave. I can't do this. Until you said, well, you can write it in the chat and you'll put it in there, because I tried to do it. I thought I was doing it, but it didn't work. And so it was a very interesting technical thing to experience. And it was exciting to see the comments that the people wrote, because in this way, it was able to really get into touch with a lot of people in a deeper level very fast. That's what I would say would be a takeaway, was how easy it was. It was just and really deep questions. I mean, very personal, very intimate on the one hand, and very important. Yeah. So yeah, it was a neat experience. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Anyone else?
I thought it's really nice with your practice of the mural app. Just I liked noticing in my body just that somatic sense of what I felt is like tension initially. It's like, uh-oh, what is this? It's like we haven't done any sessions like this. And what are we supposed to do? And there was like this woof of energy. And then I just noticed how kind of calm everything became. And I reflect on that as just a metaphor for life in general. It's like suddenly we're given something new or challenging or something we don't know. And then it's like the initial tendency is to just worry about it or get worked up or want to give up, or like Cindy said, uh-oh. And I think we may have lost 1 or 2 people also. I love that Tamar sat in somehow, even through Tamar's frustration.
Yes, thank you, Tamar.
I just like the kind of the creativity of having done something like this. I also wonder why also. If there was a bigger group, I imagine it could have been really helpful. So that's not a complaint, but I'm also kind of wondering why we did it this way or why you did it this way. And having done it this way, it was also just really fun. And this felt playful. Yeah.
Well, I know you're hungry for play, so
Yeah.
I'm glad that this felt playful.
Yeah.
So I enjoy the ideas and the principles and your articulation of that. For me, using this model and answering questions was kind of analytical and cognitive, trying to formulate answers in boxes. And I spent a lot of the time trying to figure out how to erase a box and never did find how to do that.
You only just have to hit the delete button on your screen, Jean, and then you can delete a box.
All right, I'm going to delete. Oh, thank you.
There we go.
That was my biggest learning, right?
Yeah, the 6 qualities, community, personal transformation, all of that. This is what I went looking for when we moved from Colorado to North Carolina. And I really feel like I've found so much of it. I just felt it was missing community, especially accountability, creativity, purpose finding. And I found it so much when we got here. And it just continues to build. So I feel really grateful, and I'm feeling abundant.
Good. Next week's Saturday call will be all about somatic prayer and somatic practices. We're not gonna use Mural for that. It's just gonna be a call. We're gonna be being with each other on Zoom for that one. But then week 3, we're gonna be back in a Mural to talk about envisioning future community spaces and what those might look like. So this Mural will stay open in perpetuity as long as you have that browser link. All right, well then I'm going to show you the next steps here. The next steps are you can double click on the Amazon link right here. That's going to take you to Amazon to buy the new book, Spiritual Edge. This is my newest work. It's the themes that we just discussed are explored in the book. They're also listed and repeated in the book, and we talk about the HDS study in there. But it's a collection of writings from when I was leading Integral Church, not only the talks that we had in the circles. I can stop sharing my screen now. Not only the talks that we had in circles for those many years that were sometimes a handout or a printout, and sometimes just talking points and off the cuff, but just they sat in a Google Drive as, quote unquote sermons that we gave out in the park under the trees, and they were spoken one time and then never again, so those talks are included in the book. The first book, Integral Church, that I wrote many years ago was more about how to do circles, how to lead circles, how to facilitate circles. And now this book is actually the content from the circles that we would hold. So it's not only the talks that we had in circles, but it's the column that I wrote for Bishop Shelby Spong's website, Progressing Spirit. And I think you needed to pay to have a membership to that site. So a lot of this stuff was behind a paywall for a long time. So those columns are all included. The letters to the editor are included as an appendix. And then also just mayoral invocations and, lectures from, like from the MLK memorials and in iftar dinners. All of those talks are in there as well. And I included some prayers in the back. So consider it a companion piece to the Integral Church book. If the Integral Church was how, then this is the what, right? So if you're interested in grabbing it, the link is there in the mural. But now the next steps are that we are meeting again next week. And we will be, like I said, just on Zoom. And we'll be talking about prayer and body practices next week. How do we open a container with those? How do we sustain and design an experience with those? How do we safely close the container with those? So we'll be practicing some and discussing some of those. So I just want to repeat, thank you so much to everybody for being on this call on a Saturday. I know your time is valuable. So good to meet new faces, and some that are just a few hours away from me. So yeah, it's exciting to meet everybody, and I invite you at this point to just unmute and say your goodbyes.